Hello and welcome to the Death of E-Learning.
This is the podcast where we put on our waterproof gear, get in our waders and march into the swamp of e-learning to pull out those things that block the flow and make learning become stagnant, and plant just the right amount of nurturing seeds to encourage learning transfer. Or rather, we drag out specialists in front of the mic to help us do exactly that.
That is right. But that's what Luke might have said. But he's gone. This is the first episode without Luke, although he's actually in the main segment, so this is quite a long goodbye. So I'm still Stefan, and I'm here with Dan.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I don't know when this is going to go out, but I'm feeling a little bit proud of myself. I've done a significant amount of my Christmas shopping, so I'm feeling good.
Nice. Yes, I think this is actually going to go out in January. So this will be a retrospective to your Christmas shopping when it's all over.
Mm-hmm.
But I've actually also done my Christmas shopping and we've kept it minimal. The only present I have left to buy at this point is for my husband. But I know what I'm going to get him. So yeah.
Oh, well, you've done 90% of the work then.
Exactly. So here we are, another episode. And obviously, first time intro with you, Dan. I'm very excited. Our keen listeners may have heard the end of the previous episode where we introduce you officially. But it's amazing to have you here and have you take over from Luke, who has left us and gone to pastures new.
Yeah, big shoes to fill.
Big shoes to fill, indeed, yes. Now, way back in 2022, the first question we asked each other when Luke and I did this in the first episode was, briefly, who are you and what do you do?
Yes, I'm Dan. I'm senior learning designer at Learning Pool, which means I design all sorts of digital learning interventions.
And how do you think, what made you end up be a learning designer? What's your kind of path to this role that you've currently got?
Do people have like a traditional path to learning design? I don't know. I ended up as a learning designer. It was a very active choice. Before this, I spent 10 years working in the third sector, mainly in kind of operations and program management. In my last role, a big part of that was working with a huge network of swimming teachers and people that taught swimming teachers, and developed a program with them to teach children with disabilities, mobility impairments and visual and sensory impairments, teaching them how to swim. So creating a bespoke program there. And I think I realized that process of designing a program, working with those experts, to create real change in people's lives was something I really enjoyed. And something I think for the first time in my life, I thought, oh, actually, I'm quite good at this. And so I took a bit of a jump and changed the direction of my career to become a learning designer. That was around 4 years ago.
Yes. How cool is it when you discover that kind of, oh, I'm really good at this and I really enjoy it? I had this very similar thing.
Actually, I would say probably in my career, training has always been there.
Yeah.
But not so much digital. A lot of that was face to face. So there's fun in that and the kind of performance of it, and seeing people in the flesh. But it's the learning design part of it, particularly with digital, is like really thinking about it up front and then creating something quite crafted that you then deliver to the learner.
I also think that for people who design online learning, like you and me, it really adds something to have spent some time doing in-person training, being a classroom trainer. I think it really adds something else that to your experience that can be helpful in your job as a learning designer.
Yeah, I think maybe there's always something going on in my head, which is imagining how somebody might react to me saying what I'm writing down, and I can see their eyes rolling if it feels kind of trite or kind of meaningless.
Exactly. Or what questions am I going to get about this? What are they going to think? It's that kind of
Hmm.
putting oneself in the shoes of the inexperience of the learner, basically. I think that's a great thing. Now, one thing we talked about when Luke and I did this was who our favorite teachers were. So I thought I wanted to ask you if who was the person at school, the teacher who influenced you the most, and why?
I would probably say Frau Lambert. That was my German teacher. I'll be honest. I mean, I liked Frau Lambert.
Hmm.
I think, and I think I actually just like German. I don't know if it was particularly just German that I liked. I think I was just quite good at German.
You still are very good at German.
Ja, danke schön. So she encouraged that in me, but she also kind of pushed me as well. I think it's a bit sad. I don't think she knows that I ended up studying German at university, or actually then going on to live in Germany as well.
Yeah,
But I'm sure she listens to this podcast,
I was going to
and
say.
now she does know.
Exactly.
So
She.
thank
I'm
you.
sure she does too. So many people do. Yes. Okay, that's wonderful and very similar to my experience with my English teacher, Madame Offray, who was French, teaching English in Germany.
Well, but I should say that my Frau Lambert was German.
She was Frau Lambert.
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
German. Yeah, she was from. I think she was from East Germany, actually.
Ah, good.
Hmm.
Geil. Okay, so what are we talking about in this episode? This is about gamification and game design and learning design, where the two meet, really. So the last couple of episodes have been very learning industry focused. 2 episodes ago was about our learning conference, and the last one was about the future of learning, where Lindsay Coode came on and spoke about her white paper. This one is a much more application focused one. It's really hands-on, full of tips for anyone who designs content and learning. This is going to be incredibly rich for people to listen to.
With two really great guests as well,
Yes.
with Rob, who's from our team, and then Adam, who's a game developer from outside of the company. But they're both really generous with their thoughts, and certainly they're really talking about like the practicalities of game design and learning design, and kind of the crossover between the two.
And then we have Graeme and Luke making the connection to learning design as well. So those 4 are having a discussion about this topic.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Welcome everyone to this discussion on gamification. We have somebody from firmly within the e-learning world. Rob, hello.
Hello, I'm Rob. I am firmly within the e-learning world.
And firmly outside of it, we have Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hi, firmly outside of the e-learning world.
It's a pleasure to have you both. And I am joined by Graeme as well. Hello, Graeme.
Hello, I am within the e-learning world too.
I'm glad we've established this early on. So quickly, I think maybe we should just say, we should allow our guests a chance to introduce themselves and just say who they are and why they think they're here today, why on earth they were asked on. First of all, let's go to you, Adam.
I am a digital and growth marketer, and in my spare time, I'm also a game developer as well. So work with a lot of projects inside of various different game engines, from Unity to Unreal Engine.
Okay, I can see why you're here. And Rob, what are you doing? Who are you?
I work at Learning Pool as a senior developer. In my free time, I've also done quite a lot of game development, and that really, I think, summarizes how I got here to begin with. So it's been a bit of a different path for me than I think most e-learning developers.
Okay. So how far have you strayed into the world of game development, Rob?
I've got a folder full of unfinished projects, like I think every game designer has. Some of them are playable, some of them are a lot of fun, but the enthusiasm wanes and they stop existing.
That's the way these things tend to go. And on the flip side, Adam, how about you in the world of e-learning? What's your experience of the e-learning sphere?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I've been working in marketing now for about 10 odd years, and during that time, I've been exposed to a few sort of e-learning platforms, usually, the classic videos, tests, maybe a little quiz at the end, for things around ISO or usually boring sort of topics. But I have worked at a web accessibility and optimization company, and they had their own sort of learning academy, walking users through the platform, which had a bunch of gamification, and that was really, really well received by customers. So,
okay, so you've experienced the good side as well as the not so good side of e-learning. So we're here today because there's obviously an overlap in these worlds. Sometimes we create gamified e-learning, and we're faced with similar challenges that I imagine you're faced with in the world of game developing. First question, I suppose, is you've sat down, you've booted up your game. How do you get people invested? How do you get them to want to play?
Obviously, when we're talking about the world of wanting to play a game, everything comes down to the big buzzword, which is engagement, right? What is going to excite people right off the bat? We can go in depth into technical things, around how it runs and stuff, but really it's down to how engaging is it right off the bat. And the same applies to things like, actually learning how to play the game. Usually in the form of a game, it's a tutorial, it's a walkthrough, it's a slow sort of, burn to teach people the core gameplay mechanics so that they can, play the rest of the game. The problem, and I think where it becomes really interesting and it overlaps a lot with things like e-learning, is how do we teach people in a way which is engaging and not just boring and makes people just drop off and, not want to play the rest of the game or, just kind of get bored.
That dovetails into what I was going to say about one of the most important factors of getting people to play, and that's pacing. You don't want to immediately overload somebody with everything that the game's got to offer. You need to kind of drip feed things as they're going through. If we take it into the e-learning world, if you start off by showing them the best part, the best thing that you've made, the most engaging activity, it's almost kind of downhill from there. You want to build up, you want to fill in those duller points in time with something that can get them back and engaged.
Something that is kind of informative, but not too far in the manner of it where it becomes like prescriptive. You kind of want learners to, or gamers to jump in straight away and kind of get playing around, right? Not too much text heavy stuff beforehand. I can't remember what game this was, but I remember reading an article about this particular civilization type game, one of those sort of I think what they call RTSs, sort of strategy type games, where the game recommended you to sort of like keep it paused and read through all the manuals for like the first 2 hours, and it would say just don't unpause because you're going to be lost. Which to me, and I think a lot of people, a lot of casual learners and gamers, that sounds like an absolute nightmare. So you kind of want to avoid that off the bat if possible. Obviously, it depends on what you're developing, what you're making, but in order to grab that intrigue straight away, surely you need to give it a little bit of taste before really establishing the proper rules and elements of the world.
It's interesting, right? And I think it really highlights the fact that talking about learning is difficult because everybody learns in completely different ways. You mentioned RTSs there, Graeme, and RTSs are extremely successful. It's not a genre that I myself enjoy, but there's diehard fans.
Yeah,
there's diehard fans. And these games do extremely well, even if they are teaching in a really bad way or a way that's sort of old-fashioned or non-interactive or non-engaging.
It's like a textbook.
Yeah, and they still do extremely well because the audience either enjoy learning in that way or it works for them. It's what they sort of expect. Whereas, if you translate that to various different genres, especially when we're talking like mainstream or AAA titles, people don't want to learn like that. People don't want to read text. And, it's something that we've experimented with and had failures and successes with. In my own projects, we released a demo of a game and we had a small community of people that were giving feedback on it. And at the beginning of the game, we had sort of a really simplistic sort of tutorial, which was just text pop-ups saying, hey, press this key to do this action. And the problem that we got back was some people don't like reading when they're playing a game. They want to play a game, not read a game. And so they would either just ignore it or they would accidentally press the button without realizing. And then that tutorial step skips, or they would just come back to us and say, hey, the tutorial was boring. I hated it. And I think it all comes down to like that engagement and that attention span. Like the way that I've seen it with players is that a player's or a person's attention span is like a bucket with a hole in it that's constantly leaking. And unless you are doing something to actually, raise that engagement or stop that flow, and make it actually engaging for them, then they're slowly just kind of getting more and more and more bored. And that means by the time that they've learned how to play the game, they don't want to play it anymore. They don't want to carry on going.
That's a perfect analogy, I think, because that's exactly the kind of thing we're fighting against in the world of e-learning all the time. How do we keep them engaged? How do we hold them?
There's a crucial thing, I think, that comes up as a developer, and it's something I've had to learn to try and ignore as much as possible in my own mind. There's a temptation when you get feedback from your customers that they're having trouble interacting with something you built. There is a temptation to dismiss them as not trying hard enough or not paying enough attention. And over the years, I've come to realize that, somehow stepped through my own arrogance and realized that maybe I am the problem. It doesn't matter how well I understand it. If your learners aren't understanding what you're telling them to do, then you haven't told them well enough. And I think, that can lead to real issues, especially if you're trying to gamify something. Getting people on board is super crucial, right?
Yeah, I think this is a challenge faced in e-learning in general, is just you've got to always bear in mind the end user who isn't necessarily you, and for whom these things might not be obvious and might not make sense straight away. But surely, okay, so I'm not a massive game man. I don't know the difference between Super Mario Men and Sonic the Snake. But what I've gathered is you were talking about a kind of upfront instruction where it's just very text heavy, right? Surely there's a balance to be struck between showing and telling in e-learning and in a game.
I think what's really valuable is to not forget the fact that this is intended to be an experience. Even something simple like a tutorial or a guide. And for that example that I was explaining earlier on, one way that we solved that was instead of a simple text pop-up saying press this to do this, we instead had the key. We basically slowed down the game, so it was slow motion, and had that key pop up above the player. And that meant that instinctively the player presses that key and then the action occurs. They see it, they experience it, and it's almost that moment of sort of like self-discovery. And that makes the player feel like they're actually doing something rather than just reading something and being told what to do. They're actively doing it themselves. And that makes it far more memorable, far more enjoyable, and far more engaging.
Yeah, for sure. That's such a clever workaround, because you're using the mechanics of the game to teach while they are also using the mechanics of the game, as opposed to stopping, pausing, here's some text, continue. You're not breaking that immersion, right? You're keeping it as free flowing as possible. I know that one of the projects we had last year, which is we've touched on this quite a few times on the podcast, but it involved working with a company that dealt with IT accreditations, and that meant that they had to basically apply everything they've learned already to work in these mini simulations, such as pulling apart a laptop or installing a piece of software. So we could build all that and sort of give hints and tips on the fly, and that's as close as I can think of something we built, where it feels gamey, it feels very doing in the moment, but that also still does not all the time, but it does kind of require the learner to have a bit of pre-understanding of what they're looking at before getting to that stage. Though I showed it to a few people who had no idea how to do any of those things, and they were still able to successfully get through and understand what they're being told. So you're still learning by doing and replicating the same things you would be doing in real life. So it has that purpose, but it's engaging from the get-go, hopefully, after a little bit of setup context,
Yeah, that's a really good example to use. I think in the development of that particular project, one of the key things to keep in mind is that feedback was consistent. And by feedback, I mean visual, I mean audio, I mean the way you interacted with the software. So essentially, if you're having to disassemble a laptop, when you're picking up a tool, it would show tooltips the same way, regardless of what tool that was or regardless of what you're hovering over. So it got people used to exploring the environment and understanding that when I have this thing, I can interact with these things. When I don't have this thing, I can't interact with them.
It's those little additions, isn't it, that you can add to make something feel more intuitive. I think the thing appearing above the head, Adam, like you mentioned, what other things spring to mind for you both that you can add to make something feel intuitive and therefore probably more engaging?
I think, in the world of game design, there's a few sort of unspoken rules that everybody follows, in a simple sense. So, for example, red barrels, what happens if they get knocked or shot? They explode. There's a big thing which a lot of modern games use nowadays, which is yellow paint or yellow tape, which is a sort of guide of this is the way you need to go, or this item is interactable. So there's things like that which are sort of unspoken rules that a lot of people expect and follow, and I think it's a way of, even for people that come outside of playing video games, and they're playing a video game for the first time, how quick they learn through things like color is huge. Seeing that that yellow thing is what I can interact with, how quickly that sort of becomes ingrained in them is really sort of quite surprising and quite impressive. So there's things like that can be done to direct the flow of learning when it comes to learning a new game. And that works for people that are experienced and have played plenty of similar games before, but then also that people that have never played a game before potentially.
With e-learning, I think we go back to what we mentioned before, and it's consistency.
Yeah,
you want consistent actions to have consistent outcomes. If you're getting something right, you want the same kind of feedback screens and feedback, maybe snippets of audio or things like that. There's something else that's a fairly universal language in e-learning, especially in gamification, is stuff like stars or coins, things that represent, your accruing of reward, your good boy points, your pats on the head, or whatever they are. As long as all of those things are introduced early and are used consistently, I think they can just be immediately intuitive, especially if you're doing a lot of e-learning from the same supplier, because it's quite often it's going to have the same tones of voice visually and in the actual text.
Yeah. Is there anything that people miss in your experience that contributes to that feeling of something being consistent?
My efforts. People miss my efforts. All the little lovely things that you put in that nobody notices. No.
Those sort of very, very intuitive things, like you get a sort of ding noise for getting something right. I think those are something that are far easier to intuit because everybody sort of understands universally what those mean. The game side of things makes it a little bit difficult because it becomes like it's a language you kind of have to learn. It's like, have you ever played a video game with somebody who has never really touched a video game before? And it's
funny.
It's so funny because they look at you as like, how did you know where to go? And you're like, oh well, I realize I've been playing video games for 20 years. Like, I understand that yellow tape means I need to climb on there, or if there's a light source pointing towards a direction, that's probably where I need to go, or if there's enemies over there, that probably means I'm progressing, right? Whereas somebody who's not used to that world can fumble and run around in circles and is not sure where to go. We have this sort of, in the e-learning world, those very small signifiers that we can use to signify when something's going right, or like you say, the good boy points, pats on the head. But with video game stuff, it must be very difficult in those initial early stages of trying to engage a learner to keep going. Adam, have you considered that when you're creating your video games as what this might look like to a complete novice?
I mean, yes and no. I think there's a few areas where it has a lot of overlap. You mentioned there about like sounds and animations, right? And the same does apply to game development. You want satisfying sound design. If it's an action which players are taking quite often, then it needs to sound good and it's not too repetitive. We do little things in game design, like we tweak the pitch up or down if it's a repetitive sound. Say if it's a sword swing, right? If there's doing several sword swings in a row, we don't want it to play the same sound effect at the exact same pitch. So we pitch it up and pitch it down to make it sound more satisfying, because if it becomes grating, then that's when people are like, ooh, they kind of get that disgusted face and they want to switch off.
I suppose it's one of those things that you only really notice it when it's bad. right?
Yeah,
And that's
100%.
that's that extra work that you're putting in that's not getting appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, like Rob mentioned earlier about my efforts being sort of not being appreciated. It's little things like that. The best things are the unnoticed, like the things that don't become noticed. Like, and it's the same with a tutorial. You almost want people to feel like they don't know that they're learning. They don't know that they're being taught the game. And Rob touched on it earlier on. Is perfectly right. And it's the best ways of doing that are things which are just drip fed to you, rather than just giving you a bulk of learning all up front.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely know when things are wrong.
I suppose this is what makes e-learning a different challenge from creating games, is that people are sitting down and they know that they're about to be taught something, and quite often they're not that interested. So I guess the challenge here, and Rob, obviously you have experience with this, is thinking, how do you get people interested in proceeding with what's in front of them?
I actually, like, not to sound like a massive pessimist, but I don't tend to work that way, because people aren't necessarily going to be interested. There's not really anything you can do sometimes, because the subject matter is the subject matter. It can be dry. It's just something they need to do. My approach to e-learning has always been to just make it feel good, essentially. You want it to feel good to interact with. You want the buttons to be nice. You want things to work first time. You want things to be predictable, easy. And you don't want the design to stand in the way of them finishing, because that's what most of these people want to do. Of course, there are more soft skill subjects where people do want to spend more time with it, and I think that's where you can really garnish with the more interesting stuff, the more gamified stuff. But for the run-of-the-mill compliance topic, just, I guess, grease the wheels is what I'm saying. Like, make it smooth, make it easy to interact with, and make it predictable.
What is that grease? What can people do to help people get through it smoothly?
Make it fluid, make things activate when people expect them to activate. You want clear visual feedback. So if you've got a screen where there are interactions to do, you want to make it very clear when all of them have been completed, or when something's outstanding, because you might end up with a learner who's sitting there frustrated and they're like just clicking over and over and over again the next button, expecting it to do something. When the reality is it's not enabled because they haven't clicked, the one other image on the screen. So you want to make those images very, very obvious when their states are visited and stuff like that, right? It's all quite dry on from an outside perspective, but the reality is it's a lot you can do to make this smooth and a silky experience for people, because everyone in the working world, I would hazard a guess, has done some e-learning that made them feel frustrated. I don't know if saying bored is the right thing, because a lot of the time it can be boring because it's something you have to do, but it should never be frustrating.
As someone who knows it, right? If you've built the game, you know it. If you're a subject matter expert and building e-learning courses around it or whatever it might be, you know it in and out. But that doesn't mean that somebody else is going to understand it the exact same way. You can very easily make little errors like that, which do cause problems and do cause frustrations without you really realizing.
Yeah, that is something I guess we have to be mindful of in the world of e-learning, because if you're working on a big project, you can sometimes feel, I don't know, complacent, possibly, and you forget that some certain things might need to be explained again, or if you're like in a different module in a grander course, that something might need to be, like, a learner might have not seen the previous thing. So sometimes you do have to go over ground again while making it, to make sure it's as intuitive and understandable as possible. And it's that kind of things, like repeating instructions sometimes can be useful, right? After the initial intuitive understanding functionality wise of how to navigate something, sometimes those reminders are kind of necessary.
It's really interesting, actually, because a lot of modern sort of AAA games that are coming out now, even indie games, are made for such a wide audience and are made to be as accessible as possible. And so what they do, they actually have sort of, the keys, or, what you need to press to interact with something throughout the whole game. You could walk up to say you have to press a key to be able to pick up an item. the little button would appear above it saying, "What this is the button that you need to press," and that'll be through the entire game, where it just becomes expected. It doesn't just show it the first time; it just shows it every time. And people don't really notice because people know what key to sort of press. But it's that sort of iteration. It's the same with things like UI. If you're navigating a big map on the UI, it might even tell you the buttons at the bottom, what you need to be pressing. And that sort of thing is that repetitive learning, but also easy access for reminders as well. Easy access to go back and find out that information if they need to, if they've forgotten how to play something. I mean, especially with games, people can take a 6 months break between playing a game once and then continuing their save. So, naturally things get forgotten. So how easy is it to pick back up?
I can see that sort of applying to our e-learning world. It's usually that might occur for larger courses. Like if someone's been in a course with multiple modules, after the first couple, hopefully they would understand the rhythm, the exploration, how to get from one place to another on the LMS. Trying to find out where, I know, badges might be stored to see those achievements, to see your progress. How far are you through this entire thing, and having those be easily accessible, as well as having reminders where necessary, I think can help smooth that journey along. Right.
Talking about sort of directing people along a path, there's a game called The Witcher 3, very popular franchise and game, and within that game, all of the dialogue, if you get sent on a quest, the dialogue of characters that are talking to you will tell you the directions of where you need to go. And that basically means that you can turn off in the settings the map. And you don't ever need it, because you can just listen and follow. It might be, go down this path, go left at the windmill, go to the end of that until you see a big tree, and that's where you need to be. So it allows you to really sort of like immerse yourself in that world, but it also just means that it's built into the game where it allows you to play the game rather than playing follow these arrows on the road or whatever it might be.
Like self-directed learning, you could say is a common link there, where you're expected a learner to go off and follow a path themselves and give them the tools to be able to do that, not leave them in the lurch, but there being somewhere where they can always find that information if they need to, instead of being led. Sometimes that's useful, but sometimes it might not be the point or the objective.
I think there's also something to be said about accessibility. If you look deeper into what Adam's saying there, that's some people don't have the ability to do some of the things we're asking them to do. And I know obviously we try and make things as accessible as possible where possible. But it's an important consideration, isn't it? Not everybody is going to remember every single time, so sometimes having those prompts there throughout the whole game or throughout the whole course is important, because people can't hold on to information very well, and that's a real consideration.
It's definitely a consideration when building things out, like especially, I mean, the most common one is colors, right? Green means good, red means bad. The problem with that in something like a video game, I mean, red green color blindness is the most common form of color blindness, and it's hard for people to necessarily distinguish between the two. So having it as a green tick and a red cross is far better, because there's other visual indicators there. So there's a lot of sort of extra things to think about when building out a game, which sort of makes sense to as many people as possible and is accessible as possible.
Agreed.
So our next question, now I'm thinking about it, actually feels more like a learning design question. And if only we had an award-winning learning designer in the room that could answer it. Gosh darn it.
If only.
Hang on a minute. Graeme Tate.
Oh wow, it's Graeme Tate.
Now I feel very put on the spot.
When it comes to...
Don't mess this up.
When it comes to your part of this, which is designing the solution that you'd then hand over to a developer like Rob to create a wonderful game, how do you strike that balance between making learning fun and gamified, and not trivializing it at all?
When it comes to gamification in the way we understand it in the e-learning world, which is trying to add points or some sort of scoring mechanic, badge, reward systems, whatever, I'm always really wary of just putting those in there just because some clients or some folks might approach a course and be like, okay, we need this dull thing to be judged up in some way, and so you just throw these almost template ideas into a system because they're like, well, that will do the job. But for me, very much like kind of what Adam was saying all along, which is having to be kind of considerate about what you're doing, and is figuring out if what you're asking them to do is serving the learning point. So I try to steer away from anything gamey unless there's a point to it, right? And if it serves a real world need. There's an example of a current project I'm working on where it follows a real estate agent looking around a 360 space, making comments and observing different things, right? Initially, going into that, I was like, okay, that should be enough. This sort of conversation back and forth, observing different elements in this 360 space, that should be fine. But then I sort of realized that digging a little bit deeper, there's two mechanics at play. It's not just being able to look at and observe things and point those out to your customers, but it's how these agents are supposed to interact with their customers. So I needed to have like, okay, you could find all these observation points and technically pass in terms of uncovering everything, but you can fail if you are not approaching this in the correct way. So if you're not talking to your customer in the correct way. And I realized that's just as important, because you could find out so much information about a house, but if a customer gets a dodgy feeling about you, doesn't trust you, then what's the point? That's not going to happen. So that's an example where there are two sort of mechanics complementing each other at the same time. It's trying to think about, okay, yeah, from our point of view, how does this affect the real world, and are there ways we can try and mimic that and use that as a teaching element if we're going to be presenting it in a game format?
Yes, you've touched on what gamification can be really useful for, and that's teaching actions, learning when a stimulus should cause you to respond in a certain way, and just putting that into practice.
There are some games, I can't remember what they're called. You'll have a circuit board or something like that, and then you can build out the circuit board as you would in sort of real life. And it's even stuff like Minecraft, right? People are making screens using all of the redstone-y stuff inside of Minecraft.
Did someone make a functioning computer inside of Minecraft somehow?
I think somebody made the ability for you to play Minecraft in Minecraft.
What?
That's
using
crazy.
I don't understand how any of that works. I imagine it's extremely complex.
Minecraftception.
But yeah, it's
and that's something again that was the game never told you to do. But for the point of that game is meant to be
creativity.
Freedom,
yeah.
right?
Well, I've been wanting to talk about Minecraft since we started talking about games on today, because I remember playing Minecraft back when it first launched in alpha. It would have been like 2012, I think, maybe a bit earlier. I can't remember when it actually came out.
Might be in 2010 when it first came
Before
out.
we were born.
It'll be. Oh,
It does feel that way.
Yeah, when it first came out, so there were no instructions on how you actually crafted things. It's still the same as it is now. You put the items into a grid, and the items you put in the shape that you arrange them dictates what you get, right? But there was no instruction about that when the game came out. You just had to kind of try. Oh, this looks like an axe. I wonder if, yep, it makes an axe. It's that simple. It kind of relied on a bit of a brute force method, which was, it felt like you were uncovering something, and it made you feel really smart, and it was very exciting. But I also understand why they needed to add a crafting menu later down the line. For one thing, there are simply just too many things, but on the others, that kind of brutal do-it-yourself has limited appeal. And as we know, Minecraft is all about having as much appeal as possible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't attract there are millions of 5 or 6 year olds who play it by just throwing a world at them and they expect them to go very quickly. They get bored. So I understand the needs for massive hand holding to begin with, but it is interesting that that's where it started, and people did sort of figure it out and start making crazy things very early on.
Following on from what Rob said earlier on, my experience of e-learning has not been hugely positive. Mostly, as you've said before, it's been learning things that I don't really want to learn in a really dry subject. But I think one thing that e-learning can learn a lot from is is what we call in like game dev, we call it juice, and that's essentially making things, I don't know, pop, making things fun. You know, you hover over a button and it has a sound effect and then maybe a little animation. You click it and it flashes and there's stars, and all of this sort of stuff is what encourages you to like keep playing and keep having that engagement. You know, and you stack this juice on top of mechanics, which again drive that engagement further. You have the engagement like leveling up. There's so many games where you level up because seeing that bar go up and then seeing a big pop up, hey, you've gone to the next level. You're like, oh, you got that little bit of joy, a little boost of joy. And the next level, you know, it's slightly more difficult. You know, it's going to be slightly harder to get there. So you're happy again when you get to that next level. And it's constantly driving you to keep wanting to play. And I think the perfect example of both of those things outside of a game is something like Duolingo. Right? Duolingo are like the kings of gamification when it comes to learning, I feel. Because they have so much that's popping up and, you know, vibrating on your screen and, you know, flashing different colors. That's helping you sort of progress. You know, maybe it's become far too much heavily monetized over the years, but it's something which really drives people to want to continue sort of learning. And those sort of layers, I think, are extremely important. Juice and also those sort of driving mechanics. And you can see why it's so important. Like, that's why platforms like PlayStation and Steam and Xbox, outside of the game, they have their own achievements system based on what you do in the game. And for some people, like you were saying earlier, Rob, you know, you like to 100% a game, you like to complete it, you like to get every sort of achievement. That's got nothing to, well, it's obviously got a lot to do with the game, but it's actually outside of the game. That's on your, you know, Steam or Xbox or PlayStation profile. And, but still, it drives people to want to continue playing and playing for longer and longer and longer, and keeps that engagement up. So things like that, those little, I don't know, moments of reward are I think, huge for engagement.
Definitely. So that's the juice. But just quickly before we get to our big question, what about the toxic waste? What? Just tick off quickly. What things do we need to avoid when creating a game or creating something that's gamified that would absolutely sink it? Any takers?
I actually, this might go against what Adam's saying, but I don't actually disagree with what Adam's saying at all. I think the general TikTokification of the world makes me feel disrespected as a consumer of media sometimes. This notion, like if you're scrolling on social media or something and there's a video, there'll always be like prompts like watch until the end. I'm going to watch it exactly as long as I want to, thank you very much. Or they will speed it up. So the video will be sped up. And it, to me, as a consumer of media, that feels disrespectful to my attention span. It feels like I can't be trusted to stay put and watch this thing. Therefore, they're going to just ram it down my throat as quickly as possible just to get me engaged. And I think the same thing can happen with games where I've had an experience of a game before where I wanted the experience of being weak and becoming strong, right? That's a lot of games. I've had games where you jump in and it overloads you with juice right at the start just for existing. So it gives you like 1 million power-ups, 1 million virtual currency, 1 million whatever else it might be. So you never get the actual journey of starting small and becoming big. I think what I'm getting at in e-learning terms is just making people feel respected. Like, not only do you respect their time, but you respect their ability to learn, I think. I'm not sure how that translates. I'm a developer, not a learning designer, but I think there's probably some juice there to be squozen.
I think it, like, building on top of that, like, because from my perspective, I completely agree. And I'm trying to think of the perspective of people that potentially are playing our games and that sort of stuff. And I wonder how much this translates through to sort of e-learning. But with games, we have we tailor things to our audience, right? You know, as I was mentioning earlier, like around an RTS, that's going to be text heavy. The audience know it's going to be text heavy. If it suddenly wasn't, they'd be extremely confused and maybe even frustrated by that. It's the same sort of thing with gaming, right? You know, you You want to do things which tailor specifically to that audience. I myself, I've played a bunch of games. I know I don't need yellow paint to tell me where to go, but I understand why it exists and why that is a good thing. It's the same with sort of, videos which are like, hey, watch now. This is my marketing brain coming in now, but hey, stay until the end because this fact's really great. That sort of stuff. The reason why everybody does it is because it works. And I think inside all of us on this call and many people that I've met are very smart people, but we are dumb humans. I think all humans have some sort of innate dum-dumness, and
we all just want to slam our hands on that dopamine button over and over again.
Right, exactly. And I think that's why TikTok sort of works the way it does. It's why attention spans work the way that they do. And so these sort of strategies, they work, but that doesn't mean that they work for everybody. If I could release my game with let's say if it's a first-person shooter, that means that anyone that's played these first-person shooters is going to love my game, right? Well, no. There's things like story. What if it's a dark story and people want like a happy story? What if, I don't know, the movement's a little bit too slow and they want something that's super fast-paced? There's so much layers that go into it, which means that it's really difficult to cater to absolutely everybody. You're always going to get somebody that goes, that's too much juice. That's not enough juice to keep me engaged. A sweet spot might not exist for everyone. And so I guess the goal that you want to find yourself is, how close can I get where, I don't know, a focus group of people love it the most? What's the closest that I can get to an imaginary sweet spot? And that's where you want to aim for.
Put Jack Black in your thing and it will appeal to the most people.
I think so. That's never failed.
That is a lot of food for thought and really great points raised there. I suppose we have nothing else to do, Graeme, apart from the big question.
If you could throw anything in the world of e-learning into a big pit and never see it ever again, what would that element be?
I've not been exposed to too much e-learning, or if I have, it's not been that memorable. But from what I do remember, if I'm watching something like a video sort of walkthrough or something like that, not having a speed up sort of option, stick it on 2x speed or 1.5x speed. Because if it's something that I know, but I kind of have to watch the video to be able to complete that step of the, whatever it might be, then, I want to just speed through it. I sort of know this. And also, I just feel like it's disrespecting my time. Not being able to skip through a video or speed it up, I think, is something which...
Adam, you've graciously given me the answer that I needed as well. It's the same kind of thing. Unskippable voiceover.
Yeah.
Having the audacity to think that I can't read quicker than the voiceover talks. We're not doing that. Thank you very much. Let's not ever do that again. Having to sit there and now we're going to talk about the way this thing looks. How does it make you feel? And you've read it like 10 times in the time they're saying it.
And not have the ability to at least turn that off.
Yeah.
It's like they have absolutely no faith in you to want to learn it. It's like, we're just going to force you. And we're not going to bother trying to make it something that you want to engage with. We're just going to make it something that you have to and you can't skip.
Which only serves to build up more resentment,
Exactly. Welcome to this e-learning course on respecting others' time. In this course, I'm going to speak at this speed for the entirety. You better hold on. It's going to take ages.
That is such a good call, Adam, as we've all agreed immediately and passionately. I think that requires no further discussion. Into the bin it goes. Graeme, would you mind chucking it?
Okay, here I go. Sound effect of bin lid closing.
I think we've done that before on previous episodes. We'll bring it back.
Don't bother putting it in. It'd just be great just to.
How about
have the description?
A really grating, repetitive bin noise. Ka-tong, ka-tong.
Or just like one of those metal pipe clanging onto concrete sounds.
Or maybe that classico old film thing of like glass smashing, someone shouting, and then a cat yowling.
Yeah, and a car crash.
A Wilhelm scream.
Yeah, exactly. And a Wilhelm scream.
It would add a nice morbidity to already a very morbidly named podcast. Adam, if anyone wants to find out more about what you do, is there anything you want to shout out?
Sure, yeah. I mean, obviously, they can find me on things like LinkedIn, Adam Womersley. But also, our game. Well, I'm working on our first commercial game. It's not quite on Steam yet, but it will be soon, and you'll be able to find that online, and that's called Stone Brew Frontier.
Lovely stuff.
Nice.
I can attest, even playing the early demo versions is already really fun. So I can't wait to see how that progresses.
And if you want to find out more about Rob Taylor, contact sales at Learning Pool.
That's the one.
He comes with a price. Worth every penny. Okay, thank you, everyone. Honestly, I think I undermined some of your points with stupid comments, but it was genuinely really interesting to hear your thoughts on all those. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, great stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been great. It's been a new world for me. I'll never look at e-learning the same. Thank you all.
Thank you both. Thank you all.
So this was Gamification with Rob, Adam, Graeme, and Luke. I have lots of things that I want to talk about, but what's your first impression, Dan?
My biggest takeaway from this, well, the thing that resonated most with me was when they were both talking about tutorials, and I think it's Adam. He says what they want to do is play a game. They don't want to read about playing a game.
That's right.
And I think that resonates with me kind of more broadly with e-learning and learning design, in the sense that people don't just want to be told about something. They actually want to be able to do it. They want to be able to practice. And it's often where we fall short.
Yes.
And it's probably the strength in learning games, not so much gamification, but learning games, which is they're all centered about getting people to do the thing rather than just read about it.
I agree. I also think it applies to program design, and when you think about the way of starting slow and increasing the challenge and the depth of what you do in step with the learner's ability, so that there is a slight stretch at the right points. Bjork and Bjork call it desirable difficulty. You've got Fogg's behavioral model, which displays that in a graph, and I think that in a sort of program design, it's that sort of thing.
Rob labeled that as pacing.
That's right.
I think they were talking about it more in a kind of a storytelling sense, whereas I think you're talking there more about kind of how, like, the level of practice and the amount of information that we're giving to people.
Yes,
but it's the same. Essentially, it's the same thing.
I think they both work together. Yeah,
I agree with you. But I think the aspect that they were talking about is one that perhaps we don't think so much about in learning design.
Yes, because you really do notice it when it's done well. You might not be sort of immediately aware of it when you start a new piece of learning, but when it's done well, it can make something really great.
Their focus, right, is creating a game which is fun. But one of the other things that they really want to do is make sure that it doesn't suck and it's not like a frustrating experience. So they're trying to make sure that it feels frictionless and like not grating. And
I think Adam and Rob come from slightly different points, or they make opposing points here in the discussion, where Rob says he's a masochist and he plays really hard games and he wants to complete them all and get that platinum trophy at the end for 100% completion. And then there's the other the opposite, where if it's too hard, like you say, it can suck. And I think that can transfer into learning design incredibly well. And as the learning designer, things are so much clearer to you because you've built the thing. You need to put yourself in the shoes of the person who doesn't know anything, who hasn't seen it before, who doesn't have the intuition that you have because you thought of it, you wrote it, and then you built it, So there is that process that you really need to retain as a learning designer, I think.
They alluded to this, which is when you come to a game, you're going there with the intention to have fun, to play. Mm-hmm. And when you go to a digital learning experience, particularly in the corporate world, sometimes you're going there to learn, maybe. Other times you've been told to go there to learn, but you're not really going there with that intention. And that's it's a very unique challenge that we face.
They do mention painlessness, and it goes away from being fun and interesting, and the attempt becomes to make it painless and useful, to make it as agreeable to the learners as possible. And we are talking about, repetitive compliance, the old style repetitive compliance training and things like that, I think specifically.
That's the difference between play and when it's learning. There are questions around this, which is making learning play.
Of course.
Which would be nice to explore in another episode.
I've had that episode on my list for years that I wanted to do that. So yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I think we need to discuss Rob and Adam's Death of E-Learning answers, which were both very similar. One mentioned unskippable video and the other one mentioned unskippable audio voiceover.
Taking away their agency.
That's right.
Yeah, they felt disrespected and patronized, which is, if we think about these as experiences, that is definitely not how we want our learners to feel.
Yep.
How do we get to this point? Why do we have unskippable voiceovers and unskippable videos?
What do you think?
The learning designer or whoever it is saying, if they haven't watched this, they haven't heard all of it, then they haven't learnt it. So they simply must.
Before they watched it, they knew nothing about this thing. And by the end of the video, they will know everything about what's in the video because they've learned 100% of it, obviously. That sort of seems to be the assumption. And there is also a certain, dare I say it very carefully, I step into the kind of hellfire of saying something controversial here, but I think it might be a little bit of sort of self-importance on the designer's part as well,
Mm-hmm. Yep. I spent 2 days creating this video. You need to sit down and watch it. Appreciate my excellence.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are the cousins, aren't they, of you have to click through every single page of a piece of e-learning, and you have to do every module to unlock the rest of the program. Precisely.
And we're always talking about giving learners agency, giving learners control, so this does exactly the opposite. So yeah, I think we can safely agree with both Adam and Rob that those unskippable things should end up in the bin of history.
We're screwing them up.
And we're throwing them in. Right, I think that brings us to the end of this episode, which was your first proper episode, Dan. So, Graeme, if we could please have a round of applause and some fireworks at this point, that would be amazing.
Thank you.
Right, that's us for another episode. We'll be back very shortly. Until then, goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
You can do that with a bit more enthusiasm. Go on.
Goodbye. Oh, goodbye. Yeah, I got told off earlier for being too enthusiastic.
Sorry. Yes.
And now
I'm criticizing again. God.
No, not enthusiastic enough. Goodbye. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay, that's enough.